Good afternoon and welcome to Earley Associates webinar on 5 things you need to get search right. The webinar will start in a few minutes, and before we start I just want to say a few introductory words and first introduce myself. I'm Gary Kahn, Vice President of our Search and Findability Solution Center, and today we'll be addressing an issue that we know many of you on the phone have and we hear all the time from our clients, which is our users are not happy with search. They get too much in the result sets. How do we create a better findability experience? How do we create search so that it's effective? There are many answers to that question, and today's webinar is going to drill into one class of answers, which has to do with how do you organize your content in the first place. And we're very pleased to have Paul Wlodarczyk from Earley Associates and Patrick Bosek from easyDITA, and I will introduce them shortly. But first, just a few words about Earley Associates for those of you who may not have been to one of our webinars before. We focus on information and making it more findable, valuable, and usable throughout an enterprise and with the customers and partners of an enterprise. How do we do that? We have a really deep focus on taxonomy, metadata, and information architecture. So our secret sauce, if you will, is getting the structure of the information and the language with which it's described right, and helping companies implement solutions that are built on a successfully architected information solution. The solutions we work on generally fall into one of 4 quadrants shown on this slide. We're often working with companies on external-facing websites and enhancing online customer experience. We work often on knowledge management solutions where the focus is on operational productivity and the quality of work. Many companies come to us because they've made investments in search technology or content management systems or digital asset management systems, and they're not getting enough value out of that content, and they're asking us to help them really get the content organized and indexed appropriately so that they can get the value out of their investments. We work in a number of different industries. You'll recognize many of our clients. Retail and manufacturing are 2 of our biggest focal points in the marketplace, but we deal with other industries that have complex information challenges as well, particularly pharma, life sciences, and healthcare, and financial services and insurance. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Webinar will last 60 minutes. I've encouraged the speakers to allow at least 10 minutes for questions. If you do have questions, just submit them through the question box on your screen, and we will hold them for the question period at the end, but you can start to feed them in. It helps us sort of get ready, and we may sometimes be able to address issues as we go. If you have any problem, the best thing to do is to use the chat window that you'll see with go to webinar, or send mail to sharon@earley.com. Tweet tag is available, hashtag's available for those who want to tweet anything about this session. We will be sending you a survey shortly after the conclusion of this event. It really helps us to know what topics you're interested in the future and any feedback that will help us improve our webinar series. You'll also be getting a link to the slides and recording in a few days. And you're welcome to share that with anyone that you think would find the presentation valuable. So let me turn to our speakers. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. First, the speakers will be co-presenting. The first one to introduce her is Paul. So Paul, say a few words on your background, and then we'll let Patrick comment on his.
Thank you, Gary. I'm Paul Wlodarczyk. I lead the industrial solutions practice here at Earley Associates, and I've been very involved in search, content management, and component content for a number of years, pretty much all things unstructured, as I like to say. And Patrick?
So I'm one of the founders of Wlodarczyk LLC, which is the company that produces easyDITA. You know, very few people know us by that name. easyDITA is more commonly how we're known. You know, most of my career has been focused on improving the authoring processes, and I'm really focused on improving the entire information supply chain from the point where people create their content all the way to the point where people are consuming the content. I find that problem to be very fascinating, and it's something that our company focuses on, and something we work with Earley to improve at other companies. So I've got 10 years of experience in publishing systems and content management, and I think I could probably be considered an expert in DITA, XML, and semantic content technologies. So Paul, are you going over the agenda for us?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So sorry for the technical problems today, everybody. So today's agenda is Patrick and I are going to go back and forth discussing the 5 things that we see to improve search, moving you away from document search to presenting answers to questions. We're going to talk about the key concepts, and we're going to go through a real case study example as we go through the discussion so that we can show you what's possible. And at the end, we want to answer your questions. So as you have questions, please enter them in the question box inside of GoToMeeting, and we'll be getting to those questions at the end of the presentation. And if Gary wants to interrupt us with questions along the way that are pertinent to what we're discussing, we'll stop and take those questions along the way. So Gary, if we go to the next slide, please.
All right, so we want to take a look at the high-level goals of this presentation before we dive into it. And that can be really broken down to 3 different areas. One is that we want to stop looking at content delivery as just publishing content, making it available, and try to improve indexing or those types of things. We really want to focus on the idea of delivering answers to people, and these answers can be the more literal term of an answer, which is maybe providing an answer to a question or a frequently asked question in a very directed manner, or it can be more of the idea of providing a procedure to somebody who's looking for how to do something. But the idea is that when someone's coming to your content search, to your help system, they're really looking to find the answer to a question, and we want to be discussing how we can start to move in that direction as opposed to just providing content. The second idea that we're looking at here is, how does this affect call centers? How can we start to use this new notion of providing these answers, which is really why people call a call center to begin with, to start performing deflection here and start seeing the cost savings and also the improvements in customer experience from that particular activity. And then finally, as I just said, we want to improve the customer experience. People don't want to call up a call center and speak to somebody and spend 15 or 20 minutes out of their day to get a question answered. They want to punch it into a search box. They want it to come up. They want it to be concise. They don't want to read a lot. Everybody's very busy. So the best customer experience you can be offering, to your people internally or externally, is a search and information experience that's going to be giving them the exact content, the exact answers they want in a very, very quick fashion with as little unnecessary content around it as possible. So from our
go ahead, Patrick.
So from sorry about that, Paul. So from our perspective here, and I'm not seeing the entire slide. Am I the only person who's seeing the content of the text all cut off?
Gary's display is being cut off the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
But let's work through it, and we can tell people what they're missing.
All right, fair enough. So from our perspective, we have 5 different things that we want to talk to today that we think really can impact this overall goal. The first one, and really the cornerstone of this whole idea, is using component content. So this is taking the content which is more traditionally stored in large documents. They may be Word documents, they may be PDFs, they may just be very, very long web pages, and breaking them down into smaller components which are easier to surface to people. They're easier to digest. They're easier to index because they're more purpose-built. They have less information around them, and they're going to deliver a better experience, to that idea of delivering just an answer at just the right amount of content. The second idea is defining your terms better with taxonomy and metadata. So taxonomy and metadata, as we're going to discuss later in the presentation, they really are the point where you can tune your content experience, where you can start to take some of the surrounding information that's not necessarily right inside of your answers and apply that, so you're just improving the search results. You're getting those iterative improvements over time. Then we're going to look at prioritizing our content. So, as we were saying, delivering answers, so frequently asked questions, delivering procedures to help people when they need help. So how-to content, help content, things that are going to direct somebody to how to solve their problem, how to get them where they want to go. So very answer-oriented content. None of these things that are, conceptual and high-level. We're not trying to deliver that type of information to somebody. We want to be getting feedback and ratings throughout this entire process. So you can only improve what you can measure. I'm sure I know that's a famous quote. We probably should have cited the individual who said it. But I think we all understand that at this point in time, that if we're not getting those ratings and analytics, that we're not adding to the value of our search, and we're not making those improvements over time. And finally, we just want to instill the idea that it is a process. So when you're looking at these new types of technologies, these new types of concepts and delivering your content, you can't expect it to be like installing a search appliance and bam, you're going to get 80% better results. Going forward, it's not just about having someone come in and say, hey, look, you found the right PDF. It's really about looking at your users, listening to them from the perspective of analyzing the data, and then trying to drive a better experience using these technologies, which are going to give you that feedback, whether it be direct through ratings and comments or more indirect through analytics.
So one of the things we're going to look at as we go through today's presentation is we're going to look at the 5 things in action. And we've got a case study from a client that we just wrapped up a major year-long project with. They sell financial products. Their salespeople needed self-help. So essentially the problem was this. There was a content management system in place with really good content in place on how to and reference information, how to use systems, how to sell, how to qualify people for products, and then reference information about the products themselves. But it took too long to find the information, and instead the sales agents were just calling the hotline. The hotline was really there for other problems than to help them with basic how-to information, and so the call center was inundated with calls. And the solution that we put in place was to give them self-help and to put what we call an intelligent assistant in place to solve that problem for them. And we'll go through the details of this in the case as we go through the next few slides, but it was really about getting the how-to and FAQ information, all of the answer-oriented content into components, tagging that with taxonomy to improve search and recall, putting an analytics process in place so we could measure what was going on with that content and look at how the audience was engaged with that content, looking at their direct ratings and comments, putting it all in a dashboard, and then putting a governance process in place that let us respond to what they really needed and what they were really using, and to really drive the content development process from the outside in. So we were now developing content that people needed and used and were asking for but not getting. So it set the agenda for content development. And one of the last things Pat talks about, support integration. We actually integrated this with the support desk through chat. And the goal was that, the results rather were users are using self-help. They're using search first, they're using chat second, and they're using the phone third. And the call centers now can refocus on their original goal, which was helping people grow their business, not answering basic, frequently asked questions or how-tos.
So, just trailing on what Paul said, we really want to start off by describing where were they. So, as Paul was saying, they had good content, but all these product documents were in PDF. They had a website where these could be searched, but when the people were searching for these things, they were pulling up this content in this large chunk form that was then requiring them to go into that. As Paul said, the customer support was inundated, but another way of looking at that that's very important is that customer support was a call center function. So you had these two different notions. You had this notion that you're producing these books, which are your help content, in these PDFs, and this isn't customer support, this is documentation. And then you have the customer support idea, which is the call center. So what this is doing is it's creating an environment where your documentation, your support is siloed, and you're really not looking at the overall problem in the right way, where the information that's in those documents needs to be what's supporting your users, and customer support needs to, or call center needs to be a fallback when the users are unable to be supported by your knowledge that's in your documentation.
I could chime in too. The thing that was really important in the case that we're talking about was that the people creating the content and the support desk were organized together and jointly were serving that function. That's the ultimate goal you want to get to. But we know whether it's product documentation that you're dealing with or technical information, engineering-oriented information, sales or marketing content, getting the support function integrated, at least from a measurement standpoint, in with the content development function is very important.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's something that's not really, one of the things that we always say is that just because you've got your content online, that doesn't mean you necessarily solve the problem. So if you kind of look at this in a historical fashion, we have a progression here. And what we're seeing is that this company had produced PDFs like books. They were stored in an ECM. There's no feedback on this mechanism. It's very much like running an online library. And that was an advancement when we were going away from just digitizing our information. We were just trying to get it online, make it accessible to people. But we're coming, and we need to make the next step in that regard. And we need to start looking at this content as not being produced as these large parcels that can't be integrated into the rest of the process. So we're really refocusing the entire goal of content production. It's not to just produce content that has a table of contents and get it online. It's to make this content actionable and to put it into an iterative process. Building on that, I just want to really describe where we are with this PDF problem. It's a poor search experience. It's a two-step process. You have PDFs online, and then you get them offline, and you do an offline search. There's no feedback. There's no metrics. Essentially your user is lost once that PDF is downloaded. You no longer have any ability to interact with them. You no longer have any ability to do fault cases. So if they don't find the content, they're already off your website. They're already out of your realm. You can't provide them anything better. This has no mobile experience, and it generally devalues your product documentation, which is something that has a lot of value that should be being used, and it's also something that companies are already paying for, but they're not getting the right level of value out of it.
And I gotta say, in the case of this particular customer that we're talking about, it was really interesting because they had a lot of content that told you in the documentation, go to the website, go to SharePoint, download the file, open the PDF, and in Adobe Acrobat, press Control F and search on this word. So half of the instruction that we saw in the how-tos was how to use the content management system to retrieve the documentation and how to navigate through the long documentation to find the section that you were looking for. So it really was really just electronic paper that we were dealing with an awful lot of overhead to getting at the information that people needed, which was no wonder that they were picking the phone up and calling other hotlines to say, how do I do this? So in our list of 5 things, number 1, Pat talked about component content, and this is the idea of breaking the content into smaller chunks, and chunks is a technical term of trade. We call them components, we call them chunks. It's breaking that document up into its component pieces, and you really want to get down to the piece that's the answer. And you want to relate the answers to the questions that you're going to get in search and that people are going to navigate to. And that little orange box that's just slightly cut off at the bottom that said the key to success here was that the DITA authoring tools, we actually, in the case of this particular customer, we converted about 300 documents to DITA. And DITA is a technical specification for creating content. It's widely adopted in the software industry and high tech. But we see it as very applicable outside of user manuals and help systems for componentizing content and putting it into a format that's semantic. It's an XML format. It doesn't just represent the formatting of the content. It represents what the content is. So for instance, a task is a component. You might have a manual full of, say, 30 different procedures. A component would be one of those procedures. And inside of DITA, we're able to take those steps inside of that procedure and actually say, this is a step. It's not just a numbered paragraph. So we're able to use that information to make search much more effective. And as the box says, the key to success is authoring tools for DITA used to be designed for tech writers. They were people that were used to looking at angle brackets all day. And now, as Pat said, he's an expert in the field of making authoring accessible to people. With tools like easyDITA, we're able to put these sophisticated authoring tools in the hands of business people that don't need to understand XML and don't ever need to look at an angle bracket to be able to create component content. That was really key to success in this particular project. So the idea is take the long documents, break them up into their component parts, and then reassemble them into other documents or present those components on their own as answers to questions.
Yeah, I want to throw something on top of that real quick, Paul.
Sure.
I think one of the things is a lot of people have just gotten comfortable with the concept of XML. So they've said, oh, we need to go to XML because there's so many benefits, and they're right about that. And then now they're hearing this new term DITA, and it's too much. We just figured out that XML was something that we needed. So I'd like to really just clarify the fact that all DITA is all the work that you're going to do to go to XML. With 95% of it done for you up front. So it's just got all the things that you're going to build into your XML. It's just already done because all these people have come together and made those decisions and produced them and made them publicly available. So you get all the benefits of XML with a greatly reduced upfront cost.
And when we broke up the particular project that we're talking about, broke things up into components, a really good example is we had a long document that was about 50 pages long. It was written in Word. It was a PDF. And it was all about the products, the financial products that these salespeople were selling. And what we did was, before we broke things up, you had to find construction definitions. So what are different types of property? You had to find that one document, which was a market manual. You had to go to page 7 and find the information. And so again, the information about here's the folder in SharePoint to find the document. It's in this document. Open this document and press Control F in Acrobat to find what you're looking for was really necessary information because they were that many steps away from getting to an answer. And so this is what we had before. And if we go to the next slide, and what this looks like in components. So that one long 50-page document was broken up into a number of components. And here you're seeing a rendition of that answer, construction definitions, when somebody searched on construction and got this as one of 23 search results, that particular answer came right to the top. If they had searched on construction definitions, it would have gone right to this particular section. So we're able to get to that component. We're able to find it in the interface and present it. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go through about the feedback that we're able to get. But the idea here is getting closer to the answer, making the answer the document, and then indexing the answer.
All right, so we're just going to go real quick through the process that goes here with some pretty simple visuals that I think kind of illustrate the fact that this doesn't have to be so hard. So we're starting with these PDF books, which are these big blocks of content, and then the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go through and we're going to break them down into their logical pieces. So these are just going to be smaller, digestible, make sense. They're chunked. They're now something that can be read very quickly. And they're very focused on a particular topic, one at a time. But the next step is where things really become interesting. Now we're adding the isness to these things. So we can see that our content that was in this PDF is now being broken down into, can we get the rest of my little labels here? So not next slide, but there we go. Procedures, so these are tasks, FAQs, and then the last one is about information. So this is more of your conceptual high-level information. So what we're seeing is this sorry, the fire alarm just went off. Oh my God.
And Pat, if you need to, you can pass control back over to me, and I've got the deck ready to present to if you need to leave the building.
It doesn't seem like it's continuing. This is comical. Okay, I guess it's done. So if I do need to leave, I'll let you know. Anyways, So what we see is that when we break this information down, we find that most of it are these procedures or things that are helping people perform a task. A smaller section of it's going to be FAQs. And I think you find that your total corpus becomes more question-oriented as you go. But as you're originally breaking these down, it'll probably be a lot less so, just because the idea of creating these very small components that have maybe only 2 lines in them that are a question and an answer, they don't lend themselves to the production of product documentation, manuals, and things like that quite as much as procedures and then conceptual information does. So what's the result? We could go to the next slide, please. So today, someone at this company that we've worked with may be asking, can I sell this particular product to a bakery? And if you search for that PDF, you'll get your PDF back. And then if you go and you punch this type of a question into the PDF search, what you're going to get is you're going to get all those things down the left-hand side, and they're going to be little snippets, and you might see all about selling products to bakeries, a wide variety of products to bakeries. You can sell XYQ products to diners, and then down in here, you'll actually notice that the answer to this question is in this document. It's 4 lines down in the second paragraph. Bakeries are best suited for XYZ product. So this information, as we were saying before, is here. It's just that it's very hard to find. So where are we looking to go with this? When we look at this from a component perspective, now we've got this FAQ in our corpus that says, can I sell an XYZ product to a bakery? Or it may sell, so it has this question that's sitting in there, and the answer is simply yes. Now, there may be more information around this. This is a simplified example, quite obviously. We're going to show you some actual examples in just a moment here that have these types of questions and answers to them. And sometimes the answer is going to be much longer, but the idea is that the question matches. You're now looking at these questions, and you're getting a precise answer to the question, which is completely different from it having information inside of a PDF. So even though you can sit there and you can say, well, this information is covered, we've accomplished our job, we would argue that unless someone can punch this question directly into your search and get a response that is the first result with an answer that is easily digestible, you haven't actually accomplished the goal.
One of the way we do this is by just simply, giving answers to questions by breaking the long document up into those smaller parts. So if I look at a question, Pat used the example, can I sell XYZ to a bakery? A question in the case of our particular customer was, how do I change a mailing address? And so if you look at change mailing address, you see that the top answer on that is how to change a mailing address. And they have the option of opening a document or beginning a step-by-step procedure that walks them through the content in that document with audio support, actual text-to-speech, so that we can walk them through that procedure. And if you look at, what is the green upgrade, where it's a question, we actually say the question and answer pair in the search results. So they don't have to open the document to get the answer to that question. So at a very simple level, if we just take those FAQs and write them and have a very simple facility for creating question-answer pairs and getting them into the database and then indexing them with taxonomy terms, keywords, and metadata, it makes it very easy for us to provide a question-answer result without putting a lot of heavy technology in place to do semantic analysis. So if I look at this example in terms of diagramming the questions, and we say, what are the, no, go ahead, please. You were on the right slide. Looking at taxonomy, how do we get to taxonomy? And the idea is, well, what is the domain? What are the different things that we're doing a taxonomy of? What are the areas of terminology? What are the concepts that we're getting at? And in the case of answering questions for people, rather than serving up documents, we really start looking at those questions. So, we see the questions here are, what's the standard industry classification for a bakery, for instance, right? So we know that we needed a taxonomy of businesses, types of customers. We need to map that to a list of the relevant industry classification codes. Or how do I do this? And so we need a taxonomy of tasks. We have the content, which are the step-by-step procedures. Can I sell this to a particular type of customer? So again, an index of businesses, an index of products, and attributes of products. And then when we start getting into financial products with, say for instance, an insurance policy, minimum coverage is in place, maximum coverage in place, deductibles, those sorts of information. When we start getting into reference information and we need to relate that to product. So we start by looking at the questions that we want to answer. We get these questions from chat logs, from transcripts from call center sessions, from search logs for existing content management system and search applications that they've got. And in this particular customer, we used all of those as sources for understanding not just what kinds of questions we're asking and what the dimensions were of taxonomy and metadata, but also understanding what are the frequently asked questions, what are the high-value questions, so we could Pareto this and look at the 20% of the questions that represent the 80% of the volume and really get at those first and understand that. And as you can see, the questions that we had here are asking for reference information, they're asking for how-to, step-by-step, and where they're frequently asked questions that have, in some cases, yes-no answers or specific answers. And so this gave us insight into what the tagging needed to be, what the domains were for metadata and the vocabularies that we needed to track, and then we applied those tags to documents.
So Paul has gone through the tagging and classification aspect of taxonomy, which is hugely important. And I want to bring up another aspect of taxonomy. So one of the things that we see when you're going through this process of building this type of an information delivery system is that the terms that your company uses, they can be said in a lot of different ways. And this is really important on a couple of different aspects. One of them is that when people are searching, the keywords for different portions of the things they're searching for may not be in the exact answer. The other aspect of it is that you can't collapse people's search intention if you can't get a consistent vocabulary around what they're searching for. So I have an example here. So how many different ways is there to say Virginia College? You could say VA College, you could say Virginia University, you could say Commonwealth of Virginia Trade School. From the perspective of someone who's selling a financial product to universities or colleges or something like that, all of these things are the same. You know, they're really asking the same thing. Can I sell XYZ product to a college in Virginia? That's what they want to know. When your searches come through, if you've been using the term Virginia when you've been writing all of your content, and someone searches for VA, you're not going to get that hit. But if you now recognize that people are searching for these things, you can use your taxonomy to create these like term pairs, and you do what we call query expansion. So this means that the search application is going to be intelligent enough because you've gone in and configured it to actually search for VA College when someone's punched in Virginia University. And this is huge because at this point in time, not only can we expand the search to encompass the right strings for the users to apply to the actual searching algorithm, but we can also collapse user intention, and we can see where we have real holes in our information and where we just have holes in the way that we're applying phrasing to our information. So, you know, to some extent, this becomes an art. You know, it's tuning. It's just finding those areas where we can go in and we can make those iterative improvements and we can start to give a better experience. You know, there's obviously science behind it. That's what the analytics are. But at the same time, we are listening to our users and we're going in and we're taking these things and we're tuning our search experience to give them better information even when they're not all consistently searching for the same terms.
So if we look at thing number 3, you know, on our list of things to do, it's which content do we prioritize? And you know, Pat said it's really getting the answer-oriented content, and we found that in most cases, and in particular in the case of this particular case study, that frequently asked questions and how-tos were the high-value content. In fact, we asked this customer, we asked 2 key people that ran the hotline for this customer, the call center, you know, do the answers to the questions that you get exist in the documents that you've got today? And they said 95% of the time we lead people to the answer in the document. We walk them to the document and show them the answers, so we know the answers are there. So we knew that we were able to get the answers out of their content and get it into a question-answer interface. And in this case, the FAQs and the how-to materials were there. Their FAQs were long documents containing lists of frequently asked questions. We made those individual component question-answer pairs with metadata on them. We took the how-to procedures that were often 30 or 40 in a long document, separate standalone procedures. We made them standalone procedures. We made them separate components. We were able to still publish those as PDF because that's one of the beautiful things about DITA is that you can assemble these components into publications and continue to put them out into forms like PDF and support people that like printing things out and running through with a highlighter and Post-it notes and stapling it to their cubicle wall. We found that a lot of the users wanted that. But we were also able to take that same source information, not just generate a PDF, but also generate the content that you see off on the right of the screen, which is question-answer pairs and a user interface. So if your content doesn't, most of the time we're going to find that your content and your documents answers the questions that people are seeking because you're not creating bad content. You're creating high-value content just in a lower-value format by putting it together in a publication. And so it's not uncommon that the content doesn't contain the answers. And how do we know? When we look at search logs, we look at what people are searching for, and we know what questions they're asking. We look at chat logs and call center transcripts to know what they're asking. So it's not uncommon that you don't have the content, but like I say here, it's not the end of the world because we can create it pretty quickly because it's a lot faster to create a question-answer pair, validate it, and publish it than it is to create a book full of frequently asked questions. So it's very easy to supply content to feed the beast and close the gaps. So what do we need to do? We need to go into the documents. We need to locate the answer. We need to figure out what's the best way of representing that answer, as we showed on a previous slide. Sometimes it's the question-answer pair. Sometimes it's a link to a procedure, a how-to. Sometimes it's sometimes the answer is in a 2-page PowerPoint document, and just putting the PowerPoint up answers the question. So it doesn't have to be converting all your content to DITA, but it's locating the answer, figuring out the right way to display it, and then linking it to the language of the customer through taxonomy and tagging. So thing number 4 is understanding how people are interacting with your content. We call this ratings and analytics. And analytics grew up in the web world for marketing folk to look at how their content's being used. What we've got here is part of a screen snap from Google Analytics, and we're showing how the traffic to a particular site is trending over time. When we built this application for this client, we built it as a web application, and essentially every state of the user interface that you've seen on the screen is a web page. It's got its own URL. It's got its own query parameters or arguments that are being passed into that page, and we can watch how users interact with that content. We know if they click something, how long they're reading it before they click on something else. We know when they closed the application, how they left, and so on. So every action that's going on, every interaction with content in that particular application leaves a footprint that we can look at in analytics. And in this particular case, we plugged in this application with Google Analytics. Wonderful, rich, and free analytics application that told us everything we needed to know except individual user behavior. It let us know if the content was effectively being used to answer questions, and if people were opening a frequently asked question right from their launch of the application, staying there for about 45 seconds and exiting without clicking on anything else, it told us that we could infer that we answered their question. If they saw it, read it, and then put something in the search box, it meant that they were using search as a follow-up because we didn't answer their question on the first screen. So, we understanding these interactions. One, search-based, question-oriented answers to questions rather than documents was great. But the real big idea for us working on this project, the big aha for Earley Associates, was that everything is measurable now. Everything is measurable, and it means we can be very prescriptive about what do we do next because we know what's happening in the world with our content. Thing number 4, ratings and feedback. You saw this on some of the earlier screens. Here's an example of us just bringing up a PDF content of a PowerPoint slide with some basic information. It's a 2-page document, very easy to find the answer you're looking for. We can collect ratings and comments on this document, which is something you couldn't necessarily do in the document delivery portal that was there before. So it doesn't matter if the content's DITA authored or if it remains in PDF or other formats that are unstructured. We can get comments and collect those back and collect ratings back on documents, as well as looking at the analytics information that Google's giving us. The other thing that we did here, and this is Pat's slide, but just quickly, was we actually linked certain queries to support, and I'll let Pat talk about adding support to the equation.
So one of the things that I feel is really important, and I think that everyone here agrees with me on this, is that your support has to become a fallback. Documentation becomes your front line. So when someone goes to support, it really is a failure case, but it's not a bad thing, because what this means is you can track your failure cases. And this is really, really important because it allows your documentation team to identify where people are looking for information and where they're not getting it, and then they're moving over to an actual support person. And at this point in time, when you have this whole thing integrated, support can route their calls as bugs back to documentation, because that's really what it is. When someone is picking up the phone and calling support, in 95% of cases, obviously there's some times where they really need to talk to a human being and you just can't document that stuff. But the majority of the time when they just have a question or they need help with something, that's a bug in your documentation, and it needs to be addressed and patched just like you would with a software bug in an application.
And the beautiful thing about this is, again, just as everything's measurable, and Pat said, track this as a bug in the documentation, we know every time they click through the chat, first of all, how many calls did we deflect from call center to chat, which is important because that's a win. But two, it's a win that way. It's a lose in that we didn't answer their question, but we know where they were when they launched the application. We know what their context was. We know what they searched on. We know what documents they looked at where they didn't get the answer before they went to chat. It helped us route this to a lower cost support channel, but it also helped us track the pathway to getting to support, so we know where the gaps are. As Pat said, it totally closes the loop between documentation and support. And we're coming up on the bottom of the hour, or the top of the hour, and the bottom of the webcast, so we want to get to some questions. But so what does this all mean? And this really gets us to thing 5, which is something I'll actually be speaking about at the CIDM Content Strategies Conference in Seattle in a few weeks, which is this idea of metrics-driven content governance. And this is, rather than guessing at what we need to write, rather than guessing at what content or supposing that this is good content that we need to put out, we start from that point. But then we take all of our information from the outside in. We look at how users interact with our documents. We look at how they search them. We look at the impact that having the solution in place is having on the business process that we live inside of. So we look at how much did calls go down about how-tos and FAQs for certain causals? How much traffic did we deflect to chat? How much traffic do we think we absorbed or eliminated to the call centers and the chat channel by presenting our content? So that impact analysis. And then the last step here is the content analysis. So we're saying, look at their interactions with the content, so we know, what are they looking at, what are they searching on, what are they reading. Let's look at what's the high-value content, what's missing, and are there usability issues with the process that we're supporting? Are they asking the same questions over and over and over again, which means we got a problem with a tool, or we have a problem with a process that it's complicated. Let's fix the root cause. If they're searching, look at that missing content, look at what they're typing. Let's get to autocompletes. Let's get to making search better to get them to the answer that they want. Pat talked about query expansion, which is a very powerful tool that we've got. And then at the bottom there, what's cut off a little bit is, let's make the content optimized for search. We're starting with content that lived inside of a book, but now we're moving it into a stream, into a user experience that's question-oriented. Let's make the content work better in that environment. Let's title it appropriately. Let's add short descriptions to the content. Let's make sure it's tagged. Let's make sure we're using the right terminology in the prose of the document to make it more findable and concise and clear. So that's compliance with editorial and tagging guidelines. And then, finding content that doesn't show up when you search for it. Let's figure out, is it search broken, or does the content need to have the right words in the title and the short descriptions? And we can go to the next slide, please.
Yeah, so I think we want to get some questions in here. So I'll blaze through the last few things. And I've got a picture of Clippy here, and this slide's largely for my own amusement. But I think it's an important concept that we're presenting here. When you don't have user analytics, you're really performing the traditional thing that was being done with technical documentation. You're writing content, you're throwing it over the wall with the product, and you don't know if it's working. And largely, if you don't know if it's working, there's a very good chance that it isn't. And what do you get when you have content that you can't analyze, you can't improve, and you can't measure? Well, Clippy. He's an example of a situation where documentation may not only be unhelpful, it may actually be damaging if you aren't going through that iterative process of improvement. And then
and you don't know that you're actually solving the problem, right? Do I really need a paper clip that says it looks like you're writing a letter?
Right.
Or do I need to know how to do bullet lists, right? So that's the fundamental.
Yeah, it really comes down to how do you measure success with technical documentation, product help, and your general product information. And this really is important because the companies that do this well have better customer experience and they have lower support costs, which really directly impacts their ability to push their users through the process to becoming advocates. And I think we all know how big customer advocates can be in such crowded marketplaces. So I think that's
Gary,
the end of what
I can see. Yeah, Gary, I can see that you're trying to get the question list over to me, but if you just want to read the questions off, we can field the questions from the audience.
So one question we have is, could you elaborate a little bit more on the methodology used to identify answers that will be needed?
Yeah, I can take that. The place we start is looking at the questions. That is absolutely it. So if we start with the chat logs to support, because they already had a chat channel in this particular case, we looked at transcripts from call centers for about a month's worth of transcripts. We looked at we also looked at search logs for where they did have document-oriented search before. So we knew we had sort of 3 different views, and then we listened in on calls too, so we could kind of hear it with our own ears. So we listened in on, what are the top causals? What are the top reasons that they're calling in? What are the questions that they're seeking that are most important? And then again, validating that with the anecdotes to the folks in the call center, saying, do the answers exist in the documentation? And the answer was yes. Those answers do exist in the documentation. And then componentizing the answers. So start with the questions and all the sources you've got for questions. Figure out what the important questions were and start with those, and then find where did the answers exist in the content and componentize them and find effective ways of displaying it in the user experience.
Yeah, and just to add to that real quick, what Paul's describing here is a really holistic approach. So it's merging these departments together and it's making sure that they're working together. And on an ongoing basis, after you've gone through this initial setup that Paul's described, you'll have those questions because you're recording the searches that are happening in your portal. And if you're tracking the users as they're moving through it and you have your failure cases defined, clicking on a link to get a support number to call support, clicking on the chat box, leaving the site under certain conditions, those types of things, where you failed. So you can flag these things as being questions that are unanswered. And then you can make the decision. Are these questions we already have answers to, and our taxonomy isn't classifying and displaying them correctly? So that might be putting in like terms. Maybe we didn't know that someone was going to search for VA college. Or does this question not exist, in which case it bounces back through to the technical documentation department. They produce the question, they classify it, and they inject it back into the search application. So it's this constantly iterative process that is completely measurable, and it's completely improvable on a very, very agile basis.
Yeah, so once you've got your corpus ready and you've got questions and answers, every month you should be looking at what are people asking that you're not answering, and that sets the agenda for content development. Write the new answers.
Okay, good.
Right.
I think we have time for one more quick question here, which is what search engine was used for this application that you talked about, which I think is the Allstate one?
I'll let Patrick answer that one.
Yeah, so there's, obviously the search engine is part of the implementation of doing this. This was actually a custom search engine that was based on the native search in easyDITA. So it was something that we put together that was going to serve Allstate's purposes very specifically. That works. It's worked very well. So I mean, that's a good implementation of what we were looking at from the perspective of trying to solve a problem with search. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the only search engine that can be used for these types of things. The really nice part about that is, especially if you're working with Earley and easyDITA, is that easyDITA is primarily an authoring application, where people who help in content development, And Earley is just a fantastic set of people who understand taxonomy and search and those types of things. So when you put those two things together, you may end up using search technology that we build. You may end up using search technology that someone else builds. But what it really comes down to is you have a set of experts who aren't necessarily inclined to one search technology and really understand a wide array of different technologies and where they apply and when they're the best choice.
Yeah, we've built solutions, question and answer solutions using SharePoint Search, Fast Search and Transfer, Lucene Search. We've got experience with autonomy. So I think the search engine is not the ultimate determiner of whether you can do this or not. It's really the overall approach to componentizing your content and getting into a real metrics-driven governance process for keeping it tuned.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and I want to thank Patrick and thank the audience for joining us today. We look forward to having you in future webinars. And again, just a reminder to try to complete the survey for us and look for a link to the recording in a couple of days, and that will be mailed to you by Sharon. Thank you.